Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending SolidCAD's webinar today, Digital Submission Mastery for Municipalities. My name is Tracy McKim, and I am an account executive here at SolidCAD. Next slide, please, Dave. At SolidCAD, our core purpose is to accelerate our clients' digital transformation journeys. We empower clients through innovative consulting and technology services, reinforcing our dedication to their success. An excellent example of this is our work with the City of Barrie on their digital submission project, more of which you'll be hearing about today. Next slide, please, Dave. SolidCAD is more than just a technology provider. We are a consulting firm specializing in digital transformation solutions across various industries. SolidCAD takes a comprehensive approach to digital transformation by examining every aspect of our clients' business operations. Our strategy includes understanding the unique needs of each department and team to ensure that the implementation of digital tools and processes is cohesive and effective. This holistic approach helps our clients achieve better integration, efficiency, and productivity across all facets of their business. SolidCAD's expertise was there to assist the City of Barrie during their ambitious digital submission project. At this point, I'd like to hand off to SolidCAD Project Manager and Technical Consultant Dave Hill. Over to you, Dave.
Thanks very much, Tracy. Appreciate the introduction, and let's get started on the details of automating submissions and validation of data. So just kind of a quick overview here. Appreciate everybody getting together this afternoon on the webinar here of automating digital engineering submissions. Now, this topic is of great interest these days, and we're really happy that you kind of join us and explore how the industry is addressing the need to automate the submission process for engineering projects. Now, these projects could be capital works projects that your teams are working with, internally. They could also, of course, those would be road or road rehab, maybe water distribution system improvements. It could be sewer improvements. It could also be, plants, meaning, could be wastewater treatment plants. And not to mention working with private sector as well when it comes to new subdivisions and new site plan projects. So today, this is kind of really important. The project designs, as you all are aware, and the industry has moved to the digital world when it comes to developing and creating engineering projects and designs. So these designs are full of data, right? Whether you're using Civil 3D, whether you're using some other product, there's a lot of data in there, and that data is needed at the end of the job or during the design phase by engineering and GIS and operations and asset management teams within the different cities and towns and municipalities. And now, of course, this data is critical, to validate that it's critical to validate that data supplied is correct and meets the jurisdictional standards. So whoever is, who you're submitting to, they're going to have their own standards. Obviously, there's going to be some that are on the design side. There's some going to be on the drafting side. Those specific standards have to be met, and the object data that's being pushed through via the CAD files or any of the other engineering files that may be required for the submission, they need to be obviously validated and reviewed and then pulled into the systems that the city runs internally. So the requirement now to streamline this process, right, at the same time validating the content of the submission, is really a critical component of improving the operations within the cities and towns and municipalities. So it helps them move forward, but at the same time, it's obviously going to help in the communication back and forth between external consultants, external other agencies outside of the city, also with contractors. So that transfer of information back and forth is greatly, greatly improved. So just by way of introduction, who do we have today? We have myself, Dave Hill. I'm a technical consultant and project manager at SolidCAD, working with the infrastructure team to work on infrastructure projects, CAD to GIS projects, and the automation of the submission process as well. Part of our project team was Jerry James and Frank Zander. They are technical consultants as well with SolidCAD on the data integration and GIS solution side. So they worked very heavily on these projects. And we're very fortunate to have with us Brent Harlow and Catherine Nutchman from the city of Barrie, who was leading the project to implement the automated submission process within the city of Barrie, and they're going to be very happy to share some of their experiences on that. So let's just quickly talk about our agenda. So in this session, we're going to explore a few things here. We're going to look at the typical state of the engineering process right now when it comes to the submission side of things, and kind of look at the challenges of implementing a automation and validation process as well, kind of give you some details on what those as-is states and challenges were. And we'll also do a bit of a sample or a demonstration of the workflow that the city of Barrie is using. I'll do that live. I'll do it without a net as they speak. So everything will take some drawings and submit those through that portal so you can see how that in fact works. So the city of Barrie and Brent and Catherine will speak to the kind of the decision behind implementing the automation and kind of the journey through the development of that process. So that's going to be our agenda. I'll get started in a second. We do have the Q&A, or sorry, the chat up. So if you do have some questions as we're going through it, please type them in the Q&A. We'll be monitoring that chat window, and we'll stop periodically to respond to any questions if they're popping up and are relevant to the topic discussed. So please feel free to interact, and we'll have some more time at the end for questions. Okay. Going to go to the next slide here, and we're going to talk about the as-is state here for a minute. And I'm going to go through a bit of an overview, and then I'll pass it off to Brent to kind of speak to some of the as-is practices that they've found in the city of Barrie, and as well as talking to other cities and municipalities. So overall, the current state of affairs, the as-is state is engineering submissions. While the drawings are digital, meaning they're CAD files, the submission process is more or less manual. They're going to be submitting drawings in via email perhaps, or even putting them in FTP, depending on the size of the project. So that data is coming in that way. That has to go to a contact person, and then I'll obviously get the beginning of the validation, and the review begins. Now, the validation of the local design standards, meaning could be template you're using, it could be the data in the project that's needed. All of that stuff requires validation to see that it conforms to the local standards or the design standards, and that again requires manual intervention. As the project progresses through the design stage, you're going to have some submissions that are going to be required. Perhaps there's multiple submissions for many types of projects. Even at the as-built stage, when you're trying to get that project assumed and then ultimately get your finances back out of the city, right? The data can be in the drawing, but it could be presented in a fashion that is not readily accessible, or maybe not even consistent with what's required. And that again requires review and some manual intervention from staff on the city side, as well as back and forth to make sure the data is correct or not missing or to be validated. And then last but not least, when the data does finally receive or get into the GIS kind of area to be input into the corporate GIS system, that system or process right now is often heavily manual. It's very tedious, and it requires extensive user input to do a QA/QC, as well as then manually digitize that in there, and that takes time. and that slows the process down. So having given you that bit of overview as the as-is state, I'm going to kick it over to Brent and Catherine's for some of their input on the as-is state, and then move into some of the challenges that they identified as we go through. So over to you, Brent.
Yeah, thanks, Dave, and thanks everyone for attending this afternoon. We appreciate it. I can attest to what Dave was speaking to for the as-is state, as that was pretty much where we were when we first started down this path here at the city. We had a DAS process, we had a drawing standard, but both of them and the whole process involved a lot of staff interaction and intervention throughout, with little to no automation and a lot of back and forth, which was, was not a very efficient way to do things. We knew we could make it better and wanted to find out how we could make it better. Most of the drawings we receive are drawn differently, which is normal when we're not really enforcing that standard that needed to be drawn, because everyone draws things how they like to do it. So that's led us to have to interpret, and it took a lot of time to understand the drawings as they came in, and reviewing them, making sure that everything that was supposed to be there was supposed to be there, and understanding really what it is that was there, especially from a GS standpoint. It was very time consuming because we're not CAD experts at all. So there was a lot of back and forth with the staff here to ask questions, understand, which could then lead back to the consultants or whoever submitted that drawing to ask that as well. So the process wasn't very efficient. It worked, it was manageable. It just took a lot of time. We also would receive drawings in different formats, including some good old PDF ones, which from a GS perspective is not a fun thing to have to redraw, especially when you know someone created it digitally. Then to get that in a PDF just takes a lot of time to transfer all the information that is in there and get that into a GIS. From a CAD perspective, most of the time, the spatial stuff wasn't too bad. We've noticed a significant improvement over the years in how CAD draws spatially. It was a lot more on the attribution side. It wasn't necessarily tied to that feature that was in the drawing. So while we might be able to copy the drawing into the GIS, we still had to reattribute everything every time we put something in there. So for example, a 1.5 kilometer stretch of infrastructure might take us up to 2 weeks to get in there, depending on a variety of factors, but that would be a typical time we could take for us to get it in there. And we have corporate systems that rely on this information to be in their systems so they can proceed with their work. It could be application submissions, it could be field validations, it could be maintenance work. They all need that information into their systems as quickly as possible, which means we have to get into a GS as quickly as possible because they feed directly off of our GS information. Going back to the standard that we kind of had before, it was created was 2017, was done in-house with engineering and GIS staff, but we had more of a focus on how we were going to extract that GIS information, which at the time made sense, but maybe that wasn't the right approach. We look back on it, but maybe that's the path we went down. And we also didn't have a true owner or a committee for the DS process as a whole, which meant we had different versions of templates, for example, internally and externally, which we didn't realize, as well as enforcing it meant a bit harder, and then keeping the whole standards and templates up to date was just not as efficient as we probably should have been doing. I can go to the next slide. So what did we need to achieve to kind of get to where we wanted to do? Well, first we knew we needed to have an automated submission process. And the solution that was developed needed to have the ability to not only automate the process for the DS, but also validate the submissions for meeting the standards that we had. That's probably one of the main factors in creating that consistency in the drawings that we receive, which will reduce the time and create the efficiencies that we're looking for out of this project. We know we also want to have an immediate feedback mechanism, and we talked about the back and forth taking some time. So when that submitter submits a drawing, we want to make sure that they get an immediate feedback to, hey, did you submit it properly? Did it meet their standards within the template that we asked? Or did it not? If it didn't, then we weren't going to say, all right, go fix it. we'd actually providing where you needed to fix it, and so we don't have to guess it. So here's a list of what you need to fix. Go back and fix that. And again, that saves that back and forth, GS asking questions, the infrastructure and the consultants, just a much better feedback. And when someone submits it, they can submit it anytime, 24/7, and they get that feedback. They don't have to wait till the next day or on a vacation. It's just a much quicker mechanism to get it there. And then we also needed to reduce that time to get the data into our corporate systems, which means we needed to find a better way to extract the data from the drawings we received and get that into the GIS. And mainly that's on the consistency side to ensure that we're getting drawings done in a way that's consistent, and we have the ability to extract the information both spatially and on the attributes of it as seamlessly as possible. Next slide, Dave. So how do we kind of figure this out? It's this kind of project as a whole has been on my kind of radar and list for probably over 15 years to get a full successful implementation, just because of the time that it takes for, especially on the GIS side, to deliver what we're trying to deliver. And one thing that popped up was the Streamlined Development Approval Fund, which was announced in 2022, I believe it was, by the province. Its goal was to expedite the development approval process. And I saw that as a perfect opportunity to move this initiative forward. So I brought that forth to the folks that are involved in it, and we got approved for the project to move forward to be funded from that regards, which is great. But now we had the funds. We just need to figure out how the heck we were going to make this happen. As we know, internally, we didn't have the capacity from a resourcing perspective to do it. Both CAD and GIS were beyond the limit of our work capacity right now. And we also knew that we needed to find someone to bridge the gap between CAD and GIS. We have CAD experts, we have GIS experts, but we don't necessarily speak that same language all the time. And it's nice to have someone who can bridge that gap, has that knowledge, has that experience in both of those areas. We're also looking to figure out, bring someone on board who had development standards expertise, who could create that automation. So we had the technical ability to create that automation and the validation for us. And when we kind of put all that together, we knew we couldn't do that as an in-house solution. So we went out to an RFP, and SolidCAD was a successful component to that RFP. And we were quite happy that we were, as it's been great work with them. And the solution that was delivered was definitely met the goals that we set out to achieve. What we also wanted to look at is, in order for this to be successful, we had to look at creating a process that would work for everybody. As I kind of mentioned before, the previous one sort of looked at the GIS extraction. We had some CAD components for it for sure, but we definitely had a focus on the GIS extraction. Now we needed to take a step back and look at the holistic process, from making it work for the submitter, to whoever's creating it, to whoever's reviewing it, and then for the extraction of the information. We had to make sure that it worked for everybody, and we got everybody involved in that process. In some cases, it might mean a little change to how people are doing the work, maybe a bit more work in some aspects, but the end result, by creating a process that worked the way we hoped it would work, we knew the return on investment would be significant, and we would save tons of time and back and forth would be almost eliminated. Now that we had that, we want to do right now, how do we actually implement this? So we decided to do a phased-in approach, but how do we phase that approach? Do we do it, hey, let's do everything in the phase and then implement it at once? Or do we kind of implement each phase separately? The Development Approval Fund helped us out a bit with that, because there was some timing behind for us to deliver it. So initially we just went ahead with phase one, because we knew that was the only one that would meet the timing of the provincial requirements for the funding. So that was focusing on developing the standard CAD template, and even a pilot project in there to make sure we were doing things correctly. But as we started moving through that, the province extended the funding timeline. So we were able to add phases 2 and 3 in there, which was great. And we were able to request some more money, and some other city projects weren't going forward. So we were able to get that money that we needed to secure the funding for phases 2 and 3. Phase 2 was just kind of revamping the template and the standards based on the other information we had, and then launching that information onto the website itself. Phase 3 was where all the fun really happened, and at least from my perspective, that was the development of the automation submission tool, the validation that drawing met the standard that we were looking for, provided that immediate feedback to whoever submitted it, that yes, pass or fail, as well as provide some general ability to extract that information into the GIS. We weren't looking at this stage of being a full implementation directly into our GIS, but at least help us create that initial understanding. And then we had phase 4, which is kind of where we are right now. It hasn't overly begun yet because we're still waiting on some submissions to pop through, but that'll involve on furthering that GIS integration and how can we take that CAD drawing that's submitted and better create some integration avenues to maybe even, in an ideal world, throw that directly into our GIS. We'll see if we're able to get there or not, but that's a utopian vision that we like to have, but we know where we are, and that's what we like to kind of get to. So for me, that kind of summarizes where we were, the challenges that we kind of faced, what we needed to overcome, and how we wanted to solve it. Now I'll pass it back over to Dave, who can show you all the fun work that was done.
Thanks very much, Brent. Really appreciate the details that you were living through with the project. So just going to go through a little bit of a overview on how we pulled this together for the solution, and again talked about going through a short demonstration on how this actually works. So let's kind of go to the next slide. You might have had a quick glimpse there when I jumped the gun. So again, we're in engineering and GIS, no real fancy swooshes or anything on this. This is a nice direction or way to describe how the process is working. So first of all, we have, if you look at the section here, we've got the submitter. The submitter is going to submit Civil 3D our AutoCAD file based on the City of Barrie template, which contains all the object data tables, all the other things that are needed to or hold the object data that the city is going to need ultimately to put into the GIS side of things. So project by project, they might be different. If it's a project that's involving pipes and sewers, that information is going to be in Civil 3D with all the data that the city needs. That could be just submitted and or exported as a file geodatabase file and pulled in. So in any case, the drawing is going to be submitted along with any of the other documentation that's required. Of course, it's going to hit into kind of the FME server application here. It's going to, of course, be reading based on the parameters that we've set in to check the details on the objects that are going to be included in the submission, right? And again, this might be a stage submission. You might have a 10% or a 20 or a 50% submission where the amount of data being or object data being checked has a different threshold of amount of data that needs to be in the drawing. So obviously at 100% submission, all the object data needs to be there that's going to be significant to that project. So server application and the database of details that are going to be checked are all pulled together. And right here, we're going to check it. So if the drawing passes, if the data passes, it's going to proceed on. If it's not, it doesn't go into the city system. It's just going to move back to the submitter instantly with feedback. And that feedback is going to show what is missing, right? Where the errors were. Maybe it's object data is missing. Maybe it's the wrong template. Maybe there's no City of Barrie coordinate system. All of these certain aspects of the files are going to be checked at specific thresholds to make sure that it's conforming to what the city requires at that particular stage. So once the pass has happened, and again, the cycle may repeat, but you're going to get instant feedback. Once the pass happens, it's going to move right into the city environment, and that will then be managed by the city to move it into ArcGIS Pro, where there's going to be obviously some QA, QC done, and that could be done based on the city's standards for doing that. Could be some versioning that could be in place. Again, there's a lot of different ways to incorporate that QA, QC process, and everybody has their own way of doing it. So this is just one way that we considered, and then that again is going to get pushed once it's validated. You can then update, the entire enterprise geodatabase to the new data. That data then, of course, is available to come out to anybody in the city, or it could go to the open source data portal for the city as well, depending on what they want to release. So you've got a kind of a great looking process here where if everything's together, it just goes straight through and down. And then this whole series of steps is greatly streamlined, because if it's not right to begin with, it doesn't get in the system and have to be validated. So just to give you that kind of overview, just understand kind of the way it's pulled together. As you know, Brent said, this was really the exciting part for the development side of here. Also, there was some updates to the Berry template to make sure that all the object data that was going to be required to be imported, plus some automation to help import that or add that data to the drawing objects, was included in the process. And that's done through some other tools that were applied to add information through lookup tables and other things like that, that can give you the exact object data attribute information that needs to be included, so that there's no problem with spelling mistakes or incorporating the wrong values in the actual objects. So very important kind of steps at the front end. Once you get in there, the pass fail situation comes into play, and the solution is then kind of established as streamlining it through the rest of the way. So that was kind of the process in a kind of a graphic kind of way of mapping it out. Now,
Dave, just before we move on, we do have a couple of questions I think might be okay to answer now.
Oh, sure.
I can at least stand on the first two. Yes, definitely, Herman. We shout out the city of Burnaby there. We did meet with them a long time ago. They also have a good process. We'll give you some kudos later on, but don't worry, we didn't forget about you. And then the one about, we do have an existing CAD file submission requirement. It was not a digital one. There was a form that you would fill out, you would send it, and then would go into our or the project manager would get it, and then would be filtered out through a staff member. Sure, staff member would then file that information. That would then trigger an Ask IT ticket, which the process for GS to be notified, that we would then get it into the system. So we did have a place, again, it was a manual process. We pretty much just replicated that into the automation process that SolidCAD created. I'm not sure if have we talked to any developers? Well, I don't think Dave, you've mentioned you've heard from some developers that they're okay with the format so far.
Yes, and Catherine can speak to this as well. As we were implementing and going through the process, we did do 2 or 3 online live workshops with the quite a collection of the developers and engineering consultants that would have in the past and will continue to submit projects to the city. Short answer is there were some questions, but there wasn't very much pushback. They recognize that there's going to be some additional work when it comes to submitting the projects due to populating object data tables, or making sure that it's civil 3D pipe networks are in place, things like that. But overall, no, there wasn't really any pushback on it. They recognize that there is some benefits down the road to it in getting their information back a lot quicker, speeding up the process and the administration and financial side. So, overall, it was, I'm going to say, reasonably well received. And I don't know, Kat, if you've got anything to add to that.
I can make it unmute. Yeah, absolutely. During our discovery sessions, we did engage with a couple of the biggest consultants that we usually work with at the City of Barrie. The biggest feedback we got was they just want direction from the city. They wanted to know exactly what we wanted in a clear way so that they knew what the expectation was moving forward. If that was our template, they were fine with it. They did voice the need for kind of advanced access to that template so that they could start to have their staff learn it and learn the expectations. Of course, there was a learning curve with that on their side of things, but generally speaking, there wasn't a lot of pushback against what we were trying to do with this project. They were excited about the benefits that were coming to them. They just really wanted a clear, concise, defined expectation from the city so that they knew exactly what we were expecting. And there wasn't so much, because right now everybody would, before I guess the as is state, everybody was able to really submit however they wanted, and there was never that governance to push back against however they were wanting to submit it. So they said they didn't really care what way, just make it clear and make it consistent.
Thanks, Kat. I'll speak to the next one on the property data sets and object data tables considered. The short answer is yes. Property or defined property sets were considered. The object data tables are more manageable and have more opportunity to, shall we say, lock in or streamline the addition of the actual attribute data and values. So we created a little tool, and don't want to get off topic here, but we created a little tool that is available to the city of Barrie and the consultants, that they basically have a pull down menu where the exact object data that the city of Barrie is filled out in there that they need, and that can populate the object data table. So it can happen very quickly in that respect. We're in the defined property set methodology, as you're aware, in Civil 3D, you're actually, kind of typing that in and adding things in. So there's, you can do lists, but at the time we were working in 2023, there was some technical things that weren't working out quite as well as we had hoped. But now, in later versions, I'm sure, the city will look at that. Part of that too was that the city doesn't have Civil 3D pressure pipes implemented yet in their template. So that's something else that the object data tables would lend themselves really easily to just attaching to just line work in a Civil 3D drawing as well. So there was a couple of reasons why the approach was to go with object data tables in there, but we can take that on later.
Maybe we can jump back into the presentation. We can probably answer the rest towards the end, just so we don't.
Absolutely. So from the change management perspective, we looked at how we were laying it out from planning. We developed the implementation plan, and we included, as Catherine mentioned, all the stakeholders, that's both internally in Barrie, and brought in a lot of the external consultants and any developers that wanted to participate, just to get the roadmap on the automation out and advise them as what the change was coming. And that communication of that change was, as I say, because it was laid out well in advance, and everybody was invited to participate. The strategy was kind of laid out, and all the groups that were impacted were part of the process, and their feedback was always considered. So on the schedule, we of course had some schedules. Some of them were fixed by the funding. Obviously, they wanted to push forward very quickly with getting this implemented, so we could see how it was going to impact not just external but internally on the details internally, and Brent and Catherine can speak to that. Also, the training side of it, and this would answer one of the questions on the Q&A. We developed a quick training plan and went through a pilot project with the City of Barrie staff and worked through them. Again, it wasn't we're not teaching anybody how to design. We're teaching them how to attach data and consider data as an important part of the drawings and how to put that in. Also, the GIS team and analysts in the city were advised on some of the new methodologies to bring that data into ArcGIS. Once it's in there, the QA/QC process is theirs. And that was done, again, as I say, with a pilot project with the city, with city data, and did it live. So everything was making sense as it go through. So it was a real project. So at the end of the day, and I'll let Brent and Catherine speak to this, but at the end of the day, the whole thing accelerated the engineering submissions and minimized the post-processing of those subdivisions, of those projects, because anything that came in was directly validated and confirmed. If it didn't, they didn't spend any time on it. That also then reduced the QA/QC time and let the team move on to other things that they had to do as part of their daily job, because obviously it's already been validated once. generally you're going to be looking at it to see if it conforms to the, design intent of the project. So that also then led to, once it's in quickly, the QA/QC doesn't take so long. That moves it into the project of the project acceptance and assumption side of things moves a lot faster as well, because then it gets into the finance and the other approval processes that get your, project assumed, get your financial securities back faster. All those things have also been sped up. So there's a back and forth there that all kind of stakeholders and parties benefit from. So, that kind of leads you to the outcome. So if you wanted to add to that, Brent, on the outcomes as you've seen them internally.
No, those are essentially exactly what we're looking to achieve. The biggest thing for us was how, and partially why we put through and got access for the funding, was how can we take that initial drawing and reduce that time to getting into our corporate systems. And we did have one example. We haven't had any submissions yet, but someone did provide the information into the standards that we wanted, and essentially was one of the projects that when I spoke to the specialist, he said it went from 2 weeks to a day because they followed the standards and everything was there, and they just had to copy and paste the information across. So the one drawing that was already submitted for someone happened to use that, they didn't necessarily use a template, but they followed the standard, already saw that significant time savings. And we kind of go back to some of the questions about, hey, what consultants do, we need them to follow the standard because while it might be an initial headache up front sometimes, what that saves us and what that allows us to do and how we can serve our customer, who's the public, to ultimately get that in faster is what we're trying to do. And there was a lot of processes that this was able to do and expedite what was going on there. And we still have some more things to figure it out as the submissions start coming through. But based on initial contact with the consultants, it seems to be positive, and that reduction in the QC time and then getting into our corporate systems is where we're going to see this significant savings for us, and freeing up staff time to other work that needs to be in there, especially from the design. And I think John Inns is in this call. He was a huge help in this project as well on the engineering side to create that template and test it and make it work. So we had the right people involved to make this happen from our perspective as well.
Thanks, Brent. Okay, so moving on, quick demonstration now. Here is just the PowerPoint, obviously, of the portal. So there's a DIS portal, digital submission portal available. Obviously, consultants and anybody who needs to submit will be, given the details on the portal. You can basically fill it out and submit. So I'll go through it right now quickly. This is kind of an introduction. So let me see if I can make it all happen here. So here is the portal live. If I put my username in here and I'll enter my password, and now I'm into the portal. Now, really, there are some mandatory fields here that have to be completed. So, the projects are going to be identified and given, obviously, entered in here. You have an option to go to a department, whether it's development services or building or infrastructure or the CAM department. Submitter name again, I'll just put myself in, and then I'll just put my email. And then, of course, the submission date. So let's use today. There are some optional details here for contracts, things like contract numbers or site plan numbers, subdivision numbers, things like that to further identify it. The submission type, again, is broken down to a capital project or a development project, because the city engineering teams are also submitting through here, right? Because they need to have things validated as well. And then we have different completion levels. So if you're, at a 30, 60, 90, or 100% completion level for a capital project, right? They're not checking for certain object data on the early stage because you may not have that yet, right? So again, if you're in a development submission, you're really looking at preliminary, subsequent, final, and projects longer than 12 months. And the team can, speak to that at a different level or offline. Then we have object types. So what are we, looking at for object types? So again, different object types. There's some utility objects, meaning poles and things like that you include. And then you also have to tell it if it's an as-built submission as well. Once you've gone through the top section here, the next part is to just simply drag your drawing, your Civil 3D drawing or your CAD drawing into this area. And down below is supporting documents. So there are some other supporting documents that the city requires to be submitted with it, right? A couple of checklists, a few other details. Those are added in the lower section. So really, looking at adding the information to it, I can just go into I'm just going to pull up a drawing here from the submission section here, and I'll just pull this in. I'll pull one in that is a failed drawing that I know is going to fail. So I just add that drawing in. You can see it's uploading. And once you've uploaded it, you just click OK. And it's the data streaming service is now in process. So this is now spinning in the background. It's going to insert the file and it's going to be checked. So it might take, again, depending on the drawing size, might take 10 seconds. It might take a minute. We'll see how this pops up. And once it's complete, what we'll end up seeing, and I'll just jump to it, it'll complete in a moment. But what it'll show is if it fails, you're going to get this image or this letter, and it's going to tell you that it failed. It's going to show you what failed, and it's also going to give you a CAD drawing, DWG file of the objects that failed. It will also give you a shape file if you prefer using shapes, and that'll come back to you immediately. The other thing that it'll show as well is this image, which is the results that passed in that particular file. So here's the areas that have passed. It will also provide you with a table of the details that also failed. So here you can see you're getting the location handle, you're getting the object data table is valid for the defined object, but it isn't attached, or there isn't any object data table in there. Same with the storm. This is on the layer it's on, and this is the tree type that's failed. So there's all of those little things that are going to pop up as we go through. Validation is happening here. When you get to a passed image, the pass is just going to give you submitted file is passed. It's passed the virus scan as well. It gives you this image to show you that the whole project that's been submitted has been passed, and you get the ability to download a PDF that shows you basically it's a receipt that they've received it and that the information has passed. The information that you're going to get is going to come back to you in a zip file. So it just comes straight back to you as a zip file when you download it from here, and you are good to go. So let me just refresh this. I'm just going to go back to my projects, go back to Barry, click on it one more time, and I'll just go through it with a failed option or the passed option again. And I'll come back down here and I'll grab the file, put that one in. It's updating. And when you update, you'll get that instant feedback that we were talking about. So, okay. And processing again, and this one would give you the past image results here, showing all the different components. You won't get a table in there because you don't need one. You've got everything there. So there's the message. This is live. So I'm, scrolling around. I can scroll in and out. Here's the city of Barrie details, right? So that tells them that it's passed and it's there. If you want to submit another drawing, you click the submit another drawing button. If you want to do it twice, you do need to repopulate this again, and then one last time I put in the failed one. Again, you can see it works pretty quickly. Say okay, and you can add that information with all the other PDFs and other things that you might need. So again, that's the process. This is the portal that is live right now, and in the background, all the validation is going on during the submission process. And the city is notified if you do attempt a submission. So here's the results that have failed. If I, zoom in here, you can see hovering over it gives you instant feedback. Object data table is valid for the object, but scrolling down, you see the different information that's telling you what's invalid. But having said that, that's not going to help the person sometimes doing the update. You just click on the file here, it downloads it, the drawing file to you, and you can get the submission PDF as well. And that's going to download the PDF too. So giving you a little bit of information, a little bit of feedback on how that worked. That's the steps to validate the drawing, or how the city of Barrie is getting it. Once it gets into the system, it's passed. They deal with it internally then. Lessons learned. So after all of the putting this all together, we'll turn it over to Catherine to go over some of the lessons learned from this implementation.
Absolutely. I'm seeing some really good questions too. So I'm going to run through these lessons learned pretty quick so that we can get to your questions. As we work through the project, we've kind of talked about this before, but one of the big lessons we learned is engaging our internal and external stakeholders for feedback early on. So in phase one, that very beginning phase, we spoke to internal staff in GIS, in our corporate asset management department, development services, building, but we also engaged with those external consultants as well to make sure that we understood how everybody was using our existing standards, where their pain points were, and what we could do to improve that. And that feedback really did drive the progress that we made and the end solution that we came up with. Additionally, as we moved through the different phases of the project, we continued to improve upon the previous stages. So as we launched internally the new template to our internal staff in engineering, we got some feedback and we had some concerns from our corporate asset management team regarding human error. So if you call a manhole cover round, I call it a circle, somebody else calls it a circle but left the E off, that's going to have 3 different data responses. So we wanted to kind of make it consistent that there was only one way to call that specific shape, or whatever the feedback may be, what that specific tree, that specific pole. So we created a list to start off with that kind of guided anybody doing drawings, that would allow them to know exactly the responses that were going to be validated. Therefore, if you put circle and forgot the E at the end, you were going to get a failed response. That said, you kind of had to submit the response and get the failure before you would know that you had a typo. So we continued again to continuously improve. And by the time we launched, did our complete live launch to external consultants as well earlier in the spring, we had a plugin developed that allows them to add this plugin right into their Civil 3D, and it has drop downs. So now they don't have to worry about typing it in. They just simply drop down, they get the responses, for I'd say probably 80% of all of the data they're going to be putting in has drop downs now. Of course, there's some, if you're putting in a vendor, you can put in whoever you want. But for most of that data, we're able to keep it consistent, and that's really going to help ensure our open source data available to all of our internal staff and also public is much more consistent. We also, of course, engaged with an experienced consulting support. So we knew where our strengths were within the city, but we also knew where our weaknesses were. As Brent said earlier in the presentation, we wanted to really make sure that we had that cohesion between our GIS experts and our CAD experts. And we had a little bit of a gap there. So luckily we had solid CAD's experience and they were able to bridge that gap. They also had a lot of municipal experience within Canadian municipalities working on CAD and GIS projects like the one we were trying to achieve here. So their expertise, their guidance, and examples from previous municipalities they worked with really helped us to streamline our process and allowed us to avoid some of the mistakes or challenges that had encountered other municipalities in the past. As Brent said, one of the big challenges that we faced in our as-is status previously was that we didn't have a DIS committee or an ownership over the DIS previously. So there wasn't really that governance. This process is challenging because there isn't really one owner. Of course, we have the GIS team, we have our building team, we have development services, we also have our corporate asset management team, all who engage with our digital information standards differently. So we created a DIS committee for this project, but it's also ongoing. So they will be continuing to support and govern the process, ensuring that if a change is needed internally, that change is made externally as well. If there's updates or challenges happening, it's again streamlined and those updates are happening across the board for the entire standard. Of course, one of the lessons we learned was schedule and timing. There's always something. Luckily, we had the grant. So the grant really provided us that budget, allowed us to proceed with this project. The challenge came with the timing around the grant. So some of that timing was fantastic. It was extended and it allowed us to proceed with the full scope of the project rather than just the kind of discovery phase and CAD template of phase 1. But the challenge came that we needed to get the work done and completed before the grant deadline. So it did expedite some of the work, which of course, when you expedite work more quickly, sometimes some things are missed. And one of the pieces that we engaged with a little bit later on in the process was our web security team. We started the development of the solution and then we engaged them as soon as they were available. Unfortunately, when we did that, they had some concerns with the progress that we had made in terms of the security in the background. So we had to just take a step back and rework some of that with their expertise and make sure the solution was something that worked for everybody and met the city's security standards. So if we didn't have necessarily that deadline on the funding from the grant, we may have engaged them earlier or been able to wait for their availability. So of course, one of the things you have to consider is making sure you have the time and the resources available for as you work through a project, especially when you don't know and you're creating a solution that doesn't exist currently. So those are some of the key lessons learned. Overall, we think the project is very successful and we're very happy with our end solution here, but I am going to wrap it up and hopefully we can get to some of your questions really quick too. Thanks.
Thanks, Kat. We'll kind of go through some of the Q&A now, I think, just to kind of wrap it up. And I can answer some of these questions, and I know that you and Brent can answer some. I think, Brent, it's okay. I'll start a little bit towards midpoint there. There was some questions regarding, sharing the data back to developers and consultants. I'm not 100% sure, what that means. We are sharing the data. It goes any submission data that goes in, you're going to get feedback, and that data is going to go, if it's not right, it's going to go, or fails the validation, it's going to go back to the developer or the submitter is probably a better term. But that's kind of that one. There's a question about, is the submission process going to handle Revit? Not at this time. I don't know what the plan is for the city with respect to 3D models for that one. Are we providing consultants the standardized catalogs for pipes? That is part of the template. package that the city provides on their website. So if you download that package, you will get the City of Barrie gravity pipe catalog that is to be used for those projects being submitted. They do not have a pressure pipe catalog as yet. So drawings that are done with pressure pipes would need to have the object data tables attached to the pressure pipe objects, or if you're not using pressure pipes, which is acceptable in Barrie at this time, if it's just line work, you would still have to attach the object data table to the line work that represents the pressure pipe network. Are there other plans to accept other type of submissions? Well, they do accept subdivision plans, site plans, etc. So those kind of development plans. I'd have to ask Brent and Catherine if there's other plans to pull in other types of engineering submissions.
As we move forward, potentially we want to make sure that this existing process is going to work for the needs. But when we met with the group initially, these were the drawings that were decided to move forward with. We do have a committee that's going to meet on a regular basis to understand what else we need to add on to it. There could be additional features, for example, that we don't have that we need to add into the template, and then maybe additional components we need to add to the template as well. So it's definitely going to be a recurring theme and something we haven't done in the past. So we definitely want to consider that moving forward.
Okay, thanks. Question about just getting a little more technical, which is something we could take offline with any questions you might have, but what applications get rejected through the FME process? The most common reasons, typically it's the object data table, something is missing. The system will read, obviously, if it's some submission that includes trees or signage and the object data tables are not attached to that tree or signage, it'll be rejected. Or if there's no data in the object data table, those things will be rejected. Line work, not so much. Some of the AutoCAD entities, the City of Barrie wants you to adhere to their templates, but there are some layer setups that aren't checked because it's not critical to the path. Did the implementation eliminate the need for physical submissions of record drawings from Danny? I'm going to say no at this time, but again, probably plans.
I mean, I'll have to confirm. I don't know if we even allow for physical submissions anymore. I'd have to confirm that one though.
Okay. Does Barrie standardize base reference files, FME clip and ship? I'd have to defer to that. Standardized reference files. So I don't know if you can answer that question.
If it's kind of referring to providing information to the consultants ahead of time, we don't. We've never really been asked for that. We do have open data site for all of our GIS information. So everything that's all of our infrastructure data is available on our OpenGIS site that anyone can leverage and bring into their systems.
Oh, that's great. Another question on validation occur on the production file or all XREFs validated. XREFs can be validated. That's not the path that the city took. The XREFs are supposed to be bound or inserted into the submission drawing at this time. From Malcolm, the submissions, these are done pre-designed, pre-approval as well for submissions, so they're checked at that time as well as constructed. So it's a process that goes right through from kind of design right through to as built. How many submissions do you expect as per month, every month? That's up in the air.
Depends on the month.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely slow times and not slow times. I'm not sure how many we typically get in an average month, but we can take a look. And anytime you have our contact information, please feel free to follow up with myself, Dave, or Kat at any time. Just brent.harlow@barrie.ca from my perspective, and with Kat, so feel free to, if you have any follow-ups, by all means, let us know.
Very good. Hi, Scott. are we going to produce a document estimating stakeholder effort savings, city staff, things like that? Again, that would be up to the city to kind of do an analysis over some time and perhaps share that.
Yes, we've already kind of asked staff to start documenting time over the last year, knowing that this is coming, about how long processes take them currently. And then once we start receiving some drawings, it'll be the same way. Right now that we know that's what it is, so we can start doing that comparison between the two. You know, maybe it took a bit of time, maybe it took a bit more money in some situations, but we also know it went down from this time frame to this time frame. So we will definitely be tracking that as we start receiving the drawings.
Okay. Is there a document or a link that explains the city standards and procedures? Yes, it's on the website. If you go to the DIS section, maybe someone can put it in the chat quickly, but there is a location where all the standards and the template files are downloadable. Does the city have a document management retrieval system where anybody within the city is able to access the documents CAD drawings submitted using a map? I have to defer to that.
Not particularly from a document management system. From CAD files is a database where you can go in and enter numbers, locations, and it pops up. It's not map based. We do link the infrastructure that we draw in GIS to the drawing that was off of. So you can, when you click on that attribute or that asset in the GIS, it links you back to that documentation. We have looked at the beginnings of this, and we've also have a drawing boundary file that you can add on. So we set the bounds of every drawing that comes in, and we have a layer like that. So you can click on it also in the GIS, wherever you click on it, it'll pop up every drawing in that area as well. But we've done some work to begin that process. It is something that we've, again, talked about for a while. It's just come down to resourcing and priority. I know some other municipalities have done some really good stuff on that. It just hasn't been on the top of our list.
Thanks, Brent. I'll wrap it up with the kind of the last question. I figured it was going to come was the, you know, how much effort went into the implementing the system? You know, and if their city wanted to implement this, would their staff need extensive training? I'll leave that to you.
Yeah, I mean, from the time I think we started in September 2022, and then we finally went live June, something like that, June 2024. That doesn't necessarily mean that it'll take that long. We had some process along the way that we probably could have done, well, we definitely could have done faster. There's some things we didn't think about until after the fact, because we rushed a little bit because of the provincial funding. I can't speak on the engineering side, but we had John Inns is here. He did a great job of helping us create the templates and create those on the engineering side. So there's definitely some training involved in that. I don't think it's a significant amount. There's definitely some adjustments to it, mainly getting those object data tables in there. On the GS side of the aspect, we're mainly just focusing on the FME components. So if you're doing it in-house, if you have FME experts, then go to town. But we definitely need to have some FME knowledge on flow, which we didn't have previously. So we had to get some knowledge on that. We probably could have done that a bit better ahead of time as well. That's one of the other reasons that caused some delays. We didn't plan that out accordingly, as well as FME itself. We already had some staff who could do it, but SolidCAD also helped us out a lot in that aspect. So it was some effort to get in there. That's why we brought in SolidCAD, because we didn't have the time in-house to create it. So SolidCAD did obviously bulk of the work and was able to put up with our change requests that we had quite happily. But it was definitely some work to get it up there. I wouldn't say there's an extensive training effort. It all depends on the level of your staff and what they're knowledgeable into their certain areas. So I'll be happy to talk about that more and what we did after the fact, if you want to follow up.
No, appreciate that, Brent. So as you said, here's some of the contact information on the screen now. Is Tracy, of course, from our office on the account side, myself, or Jerry James on the technical side for working together, putting together. And as Brent mentioned, you can contact him or or Catherine as well if you want to follow up with some more information on it. So really appreciate your time and attention here, and a lot of great questions. As I said, there's some it's an interesting topic and a lot of things are happening with projects like this, and we really hope to hear from you and hear your successes. And if you need any assistance, please feel free to reach out to any of us, and we're happy to discuss it with you. So anything from your side, Tracy?
Not at all. Just basically what you said. Thank you very much to Brent and Catherine for joining us. Thanks to everybody who attended. Really appreciate it. SolidCAD can help if you're looking at a situation like this. Please don't hesitate to reach out.